Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast, presented by Queen Anne Beer Hall, which fantastic so far during this playoff run, RJ. I mean, you've been down there for those two first road games in Colorado. It looked like a heck of a time. Even had you judging a beard contest, which, I mean, no offense, RJ. No offense. I know you probably agree with me. I can't think of a worse judge for something like that.
Gotta agree 100% here. I am not qualified in the slightest to judge a beard contest. I mean, if you're watching the video version of this on YouTube, just look at me. No, there's no way I should be judging a
That's
beard
his playoff
beard
beard, everybody, right there.
Yeah, here it is. Look at that. It's on par with Ellie Tolvanen. It's going real well, but it was a fantastic time at the beer hall. I mean, it was absolutely rocking both games 1 and game 2. And they've involved us really heavily in everything too. I mean, we, as you mentioned with the beard contest, we've been involved in everything throughout the games. They got a lot of great entertainment. We did trivia game 1. That was kind of more my speed. I think I'm a little more qualified for that. Lots of fun stuff going on at the hall. So always a great place to watch a game.
Definitely. And I love seeing everybody in the community talking about going there as well and having a good time, as well as, you know, even some other places around town. I love the energy of Seattle sports fans. Like, it's fantastic. Really love it. Obviously gonna have a lot of stuff to talk about in this one because the first 3 games of the Kraken's first ever playoff series they're in the books. Kraken are down 2-1 in the series. There's been some good stuff happening, especially through the first 4 periods of the series. Then there's been some rough stuff, like the last 5 periods of the series. We'll break it all down and talk about the series in just a little bit here. But RJ, you know, playoffs, it's all about playing through the pains and those little things and trying to find that extra gear. And, you know, the players out there certainly feeling that. This series has been really physical, far more physical than the Kraken have had to play all year long, all that stuff. And you know what? I feel like we're also embodying some of that. You know what I mean? Fighting through some of the more challenging aspects of playoff coverage. You having to dig out the bar mitzvah suit and me having to pick I'm still finding cookie sprinkles from that game 1 and the Afra treats in my comforter that she was burying all over the place. I'm still digging crumbs out of that every night. So, you know, feels like we're right in there with the guys. Right, RJ?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, I don't know how you categorize the cookie sprinkles in your bed. As far as, I think I'd go with just, you know, kind of upper body, you know, day to day with the shirt that's a little too small, just pinching at my neck, with the tie, you know, the bar mitzvah tie. So maybe that works for me. I don't know how the coach is supposed to explain what exactly you've got going on.
Well, okay, you know what? Then the first thing I'm going to talk about, this is something. I feel like this year in the playoffs for the NHL, there's just been so much, this person's out, undisclosed injury. Like, just all over the place. And I'm like, what's the point of injury declaration if you can just say it's undisclosed?
Yeah, at least give us an upper or lower body like you used to. I think it's trending in that direction where we're just not getting anything. And yesterday was really weird with the, you know, Morgan Geekie just taking a maintenance day. I mean, it was, you know, good reason. And it was true. It wasn't an injury. You know, he was there for the birth of his child, and congrats to him and their family. Yeah, and then of course not playing with normally a maintenance day. You'd think that he would be. And same thing on the Avs too. There was a maintenance day situation with Valeri Nichushkin. He, I guess, has left Seattle. He got on a plane and left. We don't know what's up with him, personal reasons. Hope everything's okay there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it just seems odd, a lot of the uncertainty. I don't know. Dylan, did you have to take like a bed maintenance day? Is that what you're going to call it? Clean up the bed?
No, I mean, I guess I'm taking a hair maintenance day. I'm trying to hide it under the beanie here just because it is really rough, everybody, let me tell you. All right, let's get into the actual hockey here. There's a ton of stuff to talk about. We'll do like I guess a quick recap of the games played so far. I don't think we're going to spend a ton of time doing game recaps and reviews because there's just a lot of stuff to dive into about the series as a whole. But game 1 could not have gone any better. Kraken go out there, you get that first goal from Ellie Tolvanen, kick things off, first goal in Kraken playoff history. That was fantastic. And really just game 1, it just kept rolling from there. And it was unbelievable. Gru was fantastic. The Kraken, all 4 lines were rolling. Colorado had zero answer for the depth on the Kraken, and I mean, I'm just so happy that we were able to watch that game, see that game, have the Kraken have that experience. Because oh my gosh, the reactions from you and I and everybody else in the larger Kraken community, it was one of the best nights I've ever had covering this team.
I've got to agree with that. I mean, it just felt unreal. You go and play the defending champions in their building for game one of a series where you're pretty heavy underdogs. You start hot, you continue to play really well, and it looked like the Avs just had no answer for the Kraken. And you almost felt after the first game, just like what's the end goal here? Like how far can we go? It can't possibly be this easy, can it?
Yeah, and it's not. It's not. We learned that later, but it was true, and it gave you an idea of what this team, playoff blueprints could be, and that is having the depth, having four lines, being a matchup nightmare. Just because you're going in there, and what are you supposed to do? Right? When you've got four lines and all four of them have at least 120 goal scorer on them, I mean, there's just nobody else has that. And so it's a big issue. The fact that Dave Hackstall doesn't need to load up ice time with any one group or one line or one defensive pairing is a big deal. You're able just to kind of keep rolling things in this kind of continual wave after wave of just bodies crashing into you, forcing you into the defensive zone, guys having energy, all of that good stuff. I mean, it was just a fantastic experience, and I think that that's something that the Kraken, are going to use the rest of this series, and we'll see how that goes, and the rest of this playoffs, but also for years to come. Because the bottom line is, and we'll talk about this later, but a lot of this roster is going to be around, for a little while, and you're going to have that. And I just think that that's going to become a bigger and bigger problem as some of your core pieces like a Matty Beniers just get more and more experienced in the playoffs. So really, really looking forward to that. The other big thing for me was I didn't know the Kraken could play as physical as they did. 40 hits. I did not think we would see that from the Kraken, and I was really, really pleased for that, because I think that it frustrated the Avs, it caught them a little off guard, and it kept them from establishing their game, at least in that game one.
Yeah, and you want to make sure that you're finishing your checks, you're playing the body. Playoff hockey is different that way. Over the course of a best of seven series, that kind of stuff can add up, and I think the Kraken rose to the challenge there. Colorado, they're not one of the more physical teams. I think in the West in the playoffs, they're looking to play their skill game. They're going to try and outskill you, but the Kraken made sure to make their physical presence known.
Yeah, they sure did. Game two rolls around. I mean, 2-0 at the end of the first period. RJ, the Kraken were flying. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is all the worries I had about the Avalanche just out the window. Kraken got this. And then, Jared Bednar made some adjustments. Guys on the Colorado team, the guys that I was worried about, they started, they found their playoff serious mode. And Colorado able to storm back and eventually take that game too. That being said, it was still a close, hard-fought battle. The Kraken were right in it till the very end. I still thought that was a fantastic second road playoff performance to kick off this series.
Yeah, overall, I think they should be happy with that game. You started about as well as you could possibly start. The Avs got booed off their own home ice after the first period. I mean, that says a lot. But yeah, they woke up, and they woke up quickly and in dramatic fashion with those two goals in under a minute to tie the game. But after that, I think the Kraken did a pretty good job steadying the ship and just getting to the third period, getting out of that period where they were kind of treading water with some help from Philip Grubauer, who I'm sure we'll talk about a ton in this episode. But that third period, it was just one of those, and you'll see this in the playoffs a lot, where it's just going to go one way or the other based on a bounce or one play that just kind of ends up that way. It easily could have been the same thing, but the Kraken got that bounce off of a face-off, and someone was able to finish it. It's just one of those periods. It happens a lot, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it aside from just play your game and hope that bounce goes to you. You can certainly lose it by just playing poorly and giving the other team a bunch of chances. But I don't think the Kraken did that in that game. And so it was really just a 50-50 type of game.
Yeah, it was. I mean, just the odds that the rebound's going to bounce right out to a Devon Taves who's wide open and is able to then, pick apart Grubauer when he's exposed like that. It's just unfortunate. Kraken had a ton of good chances. Yeah, it's just the way things go sometimes. I did think that the Avalanche did do a good job of adjusting. They started playing a little bit more physical. They started locking things down better. And we saw them kind of continue that into game 3 where, I mean, it comes home. It's the first playoff game, in Climate Pledge Arena. We'll talk about kind of maybe that experience in just a little bit here. But from a game playing standpoint, I thought it was huge that Jaden Schwartz was able to kick things off. That was a fantastic play. Got the crowd into it. I mean, it was so exciting and exhilarating. But I mean, then you allow the shorty to JT Compher. That's a problem. And really from there, I mean, the Avalanche's big guns, they just took over. Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, all getting goals. They just they wanted to win that game and they were not going to lose it. And that's basically what we saw.
Yeah, they showed why they're so dangerous. And the first couple goals, unfortunately, I felt like we're almost handed to Colorado a little bit. The JT Compher shorty, tough break with Daniel Sprong falling down, but that goal is easier than you want to let your opposition have at any point. And then Vince Dunn making a bad read on the 4-on-4 and jumping in. And at that point, Nathan McKinnon, he's off to the races. You're not going to catch him. So some goals that maybe handed to Colorado a little bit too easy. And then after that, when you give their stars confidence, they're going to pick you apart. And you mentioned McKinnon, you mentioned Rantanen. We need to talk about Cale Makar because Cale Makar got his swagger back in that game. And he'd been playing through an injury. It had been limiting him pretty severely, it seemed, because he just didn't look like himself at all. But for whatever reason, it was able to click for him in that game. And you saw the evidence of that in the bomb that he released from the point to score his one goal, in kind of his little dancing around at the offensive blue line and making people look silly like he's so famous for doing. He had his confidence in that game, and it's a scary prospect if he's able to keep that going.
Yeah, he looked really, really good. And, he looked special offensively, all that stuff that makes him just, this unique, one of the best defensemen in the NHL, if not the best defenseman in the NHL. But the other thing that impressed me was he looked better in his own zone, too. He looked like he could keep up with the Kraken. It looked like he could play a little bit more physical. He was using his stick and having that active. He was, oh man, he was just wreaking havoc defensively, out there munching 419 on the PK, second on the team to Devon Taves and only by a couple seconds. So, I mean, he is definitely back, and I think that's going to be a big problem for the Kraken moving forward, just because the bottom line is nobody's able to stop him when he's feeling it. We've seen that for the last couple seasons in the NHL. And so it's just a really, really scary prospect for the Kraken for sure. So that's the recap of the thing. Like I said, Kraken are down 2-1 in the series. That being said, I feel like game 1 was fantastic. Obviously, they got the win. They looked like the better team in that game. Game 2, as you talked about, came down to just, bad bounce in the third period. It was a very close game. And then game 3 is where things, that's where I think adjustments need to be made after this first game back in Seattle, and we will get to all that later. But I think the first place we got to talk about, RJ, as we dive deeper into the series as a whole, and we start looking maybe more at also some individual performances, is Philip Grubauer. Because all year long, all last season, right, that we know what last season was, don't need to totally bring that up again, but all year long there's been this question of who is going to be the guy in net for the Seattle Kraken. We saw what Martin Jones was able to do through a lot of the year. Philip Grubauer obviously getting hurt earlier in the season, giving Martin Jones that opportunity. The team played really well in front of Martin Jones for a while there. But as we know, these last couple months, Philip Grubauer stormed back. He's looked really, really good throughout the end of the regular season. And you know what? He is starting off the playoffs strong, RJ. Amongst the 16 goaltenders to play 2 games so far in the playoffs, Philip Grubauer is 5th. That's 5 in the NHL in goals saved above expected. He is 5 of 16. He is playing lights out, and he is keeping the Kraken in all these games, including that third one that was, had the potential to really go against the Kraken. Colorado could have really run away with it, but the bottom line is Philip Grubauer, he was there.
A lot of this series has been about momentum, and you saw it in the last game when the Avs went up 3-1 and the Kraken's defensive structure really kind of broke down. Colorado was getting a lot of odd man rushes, a lot of good chances, and Philip Grubauer stood tall, made the saves he needed to make. Excellent rebound control. We talked about it in
Yes.
post game, and gave the Kraken a chance to hang in there when it looked like everything was falling apart. And then Jamie Alexiak goes and scores the goal to make it 3-2. Matty Beniers almost immediately afterwards ties it 3-3. And all of a sudden you've got a game again. And none of that happens without Philip Grubauer. He's been excellent all series. And this is what I was hoping for when we were talking about the series preview and talking about who we wanted. I said I wanted Colorado. And the number one reason I know they're stars. It's worrisome. We'll talk about that. But the number one reason I wanted Colorado, because that was the one team that I felt confident that we'd get a solid series out of Philip Grubauer, that he would play well against his former team. And so far, he's done exactly that.
Yeah, he has, especially those games in Colorado. I mean, he was so on it. Like, it was incredible to watch. I was so happy for him to string together those performances, those first two games, because he's taken so much flack for these last two seasons and what's gone on, and even all this year, right? Just this idea of, anytime that there was struggles from him, all the people that were calling for Martin Jones to go in, and I felt Philip Grubauer is the guy. He's the guy that the Kraken are paying to be the guy. I felt like he was the better goaltender. We've seen it from him throughout his career, and so I'm so happy for him that he gets to put up this performance and show everybody that he is the guy and he can be the guy for the Kraken, and it's okay that the Kraken and him are going to be together here for the next several years and everything, right? I think that's a really big deal. I think it takes a huge weight off the shoulders of fans and expectation wise and everything to see him do this in the playoffs, to know that, okay, once we get to playoff time, he's capable of turning it on. He can be one of the top goaltenders in an NHL postseason. I think that's a big deal, and I'm so thrilled for him. Especially after that last game, because the defense really, it would be struggle for any goaltender in that one. Some of the other guys, though, that I've been really impressed with, RJ. The first one, and I did not expect this coming into the series, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it because we haven't really had the opportunity to talk about him together at all, and that's Justin Schultz. I feel like he's back to playing the way he did at the very beginning of the season, where he is just a difference maker. He is making plays in the offensive zone. I feel like he might arguably be their best defenseman so far through the series.
He's really stepped up, and we were wondering too after that injury he suffered where he was boarded, and kind of, was it Ryan Lomberg of Florida that, kind of had this nasty boarding penalty on Justin Schultz, and he just didn't quite seem right afterward. And that can happen, right? I mean, you have plays like that just will throw a player's whole season off. And I'm so pleasantly surprised to see Justin Schultz back playing kind of like he was earlier this season, moving the puck really well, supporting the offense. And I mean, really everywhere except, I guess, the power play, which is where you kind of expect him to make the biggest difference. He's playing really well at even strength, and the Kraken need that. They're going to need contributions from their depth defensemen. I think overall, you look at the blue line, and certainly everyone in that bottom four, I think, is kind of doing their job and doing what they need to do. I've liked plays from Susie at times. I think there are a couple in the series where I think he's saved goals. We'll talk about Alexiak Borgen later, but they've stepped up. But good to see that from Justin Schultz as well.
Yeah, he's looked really strong to me. When we talk about like kind of the structure and the system for the Seattle Kraken in the offensive zone, I felt like really everybody on the right side has been able to contribute offensively. I feel like that's kind of where the Avalanche may be funneling the puck. But when you've got somebody like a Justin Schultz on that side, he's able to make things happen. 4 points in these 3 games. Love to see that, leading the Kraken defenseman in expected goals. But also, I mean, he's played well defensively. He's doing what you want your defenseman to do, which is when the puck is in the defensive zone and he's there, he's just picking it up and he's moving it out of the defensive zone. And it sounds simple and it sounds easy, but we know that that's something that the Kraken have struggled with through a lot of this season. And so I really like to see that from him. He's doing a good job there. He's not turning the puck over despite the fact that he's handling it a ton. That's a big deal. He's not a physical guy. He has 0 hits so far through this series, RJ, which seems near impossible for a defenseman.
That's just hard to do.
It's really hard to do, but the bottom line is he's defended well. You see him, he's able to defend behind the net. He's able to defend in front of the net. I'm just really, really happy that we have him around. And you know what? When we talk about the guys on Colorado, this is a guy who's been there, done that. He's won Stanley Cups before. He knows what it takes, and I think that's what you're seeing, is you're seeing the guys on both sides of this series, the ones who have been there and done that. They're showing you how you can find that elevated level of play where you find that extra gear, you find that extra little bit of something to go out there and you play, even if you are maybe a little banged up still. And I think Justin Schultz is the kind of shining example on the Seattle Kraken of that. You mentioned the Jamie Alexiak Will Borgen pair. I guess just because we're talking about defense, we'll talk about them. I had highlighted Jamie Alexiak as my potential X factor for the Kraken this series. That was certainly an aggressive pick. But the bottom line is this was a defensive pairing that had been pretty up and down through, the second half of the season once they were paired together. But they've been really steady and solid for the Seattle Kraken for the most part. Game 3, everybody kind of looked bad on the back end defending. But through those first 2 games especially, I feel like this pairing has been what the Kraken have needed, especially Will Borgen in the offensive zone. Again, like I said, on that right side, guys are able to get stuff going. I know Jamie Alexiak has the beautiful goal and everything, but Will Borgen, he's able to hold that line. He's throwing pucks on net, all that good stuff. I've really liked that aspect of his game.
And you could see the big smile on my face as soon as you mentioned Will Borgen holding pucks in at the offensive zone. Because I did mention him in the X Factor conversation. I went in a different direction because you had already picked Alexiak. But I think we have both kind of clued in on this. That's a D pair that, while they can have fits of absent-mindedness during the regular season over a large sample size, they're built for playoff hockey. And I think you're seeing exactly why in this series. Will Borgen especially, like bringing the physical play, love to see it. There have been a few times kind of behind the play where he's held guys down for a bit longer than maybe would be allowed in the regular season, but that's what playoff hockey is all about. He's able to do his thing, keeping pucks in at the offensive zone, which I know at the blue line, which I know that he's capable of, always has been. I've bet on that on that bandwagon since day one. But that pair's really stepped up. And Dylan, I mean, here, take your victory lap, even if it's not exactly what you expected. But I'll borrow the term from Darren Brown of Sound of Hockey, because he had a great tweet about it last night. Jamie or Bobby or Lexiak on that goal. That was some pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, it was really impressive stuff. That's not what I had in mind when I picked him as my X factor for the Kraken, but I will more than take it because it was a fantastic overall read and play there. Jamie Alexiak has looked fantastic. I've got some numbers here, but really the thing that's impressed me the most with him is the shot blocking that he's been doing. He's putting his body on the line for this team in a big way. He's got 10 blocked shots through these first 3 games. He is stepping it up physically. I talked about that's something I wanted to see from him. Could he do it more? Probably always. Alexiak for me could be more physical just given his size, but still 8 hits. That's respectable. That's right in there on this team with some other guys like a Vince Dunn and stuff. Will Borgen tied for the team lead on that defensive pairing with 10 alongside Adam Larson. But Jamie Alexiak, I mean, we've seen him all season kind of have this unique offensive style where he feels comfortable jumping up into certain plays and even going, behind the net if he needs to and circling around. And it's really, really cool to see that, despite the fact that we're in playoff times and he's playing up against a team that has Nathan McKinnon, Nikhil Makar, Mikko Rantanen, that he feels comfortable and confident enough to continue doing that. And it really benefited the Kraken, helped kickstart their little comeback in the second period last night in that third game. And so really, really happy to see that from Jamie Alexiak. And I think the thing that's impressed me the most about this pairing as a whole, RJ, is just how much the Kraken are actually leaning on them, especially defensively. This is the pairing that they are going with defensively. I'm looking at their shift starts based on the zones. and they're starting on the fly most of the time. This isn't the pairing that they're trying to protect a bunch or that they're trying to have out there in certain situations. This is the pairing that's coming over the boards while play is already in session. But when they are going over there, RJ, to go get ready for a face-off, it's almost exclusively in the defensive zone or in the neutral zone. Will Borgen, 0% of his shifts have started with an offensive zone face-off. 0%. He has not been out there for an offensive zone faceoff through 3 games in this series. Jamie Alexiak, 2.6% of his shifts have started in the offensive zone. But yet we can think of many times through all 3 of these games in which they have played a role in the offensive zone. And so that's telling you how effective they are at moving the puck up out of the defensive zone and being a presence offensively, despite the fact that they're not starting there. And I think that that's a huge takeaway from this.
Yeah, and I think I actually remember, maybe, I don't know how many shifts that is exactly. Offensive zone starts. Is it 1 or 2 or something like that for Jamie Alexiak that accounts for the 2.6%? I remember one of them last game where Colorado put the Nathan MacKinnon line out and the Kraken had, I think, the Matty Beniers line out. And maybe you're a little uneasy about that. You start off in the offensive zone. So I think in case you win the faceoff, you get possession. You've got the Matty Beniers line out, maybe able to do some offensive damage. But if it doesn't go well, if you lose the faceoff, if Nathan MacKinnon is then bearing down on you, they started Larson and Alexiak as the D pair there to kind of defend. And you'll see Jamie Alexiak kind of getting that promotion up there with Adam Larson, whether it's a penalty kill situation or something where you just want to make sure it's locked down defensively.
Yep, Jamie Alexiak leading the team in defensive zone starts 18.2% of the time he's out there to take defensive draws where he's starting his shift. The other thing that's interesting is, you look at like takeaway and giveaway numbers. Those are hard, and it's its whole thing. But I look at it and, both of these guys on this one, I mean, they're even. 1 takeaway, 1 giveaway for Alexiak, 0 and 0 for Will Borgen. Somehow Justin Schultz has 0 takeaways or giveaways, just to go back to him. No hits for him, no giveaways, no takeaways. What is he doing besides just, scoring a bunch of points out there, Justin Schultz? But I really like seeing all that from that Alexiak-Will Borgen pairing. I think it's fantastic, and it's one that the Kraken are more and more starting to lean on as things go on here. So very, very intriguing there. All right, so we've talked about goaltending. We've talked about the blue line. Let's talk about some positives up front for the Kraken, RJ, because there's definitely been some positives, including 2 things that I could think off the top of my head that you brought up as part of our series preview last week, and that's both the Yanni Gourde line and Brandon Tanev. So I'll let you pick which one you want to talk about first.
I want to start with the Yanni Gourde line.
Right.
I was looking forward to seeing what playoff Yanni Gourde would bring, and I have not been disappointed, especially in the first 2 games. I think game 3 was kind of rough for everybody. We've alluded to that earlier, but especially through the first 2 games, Yanni Gourde is just a beast in playoff hockey. Game 1, he got the MacKinnon matchup a lot of the time. And I mean, Jared Bednar, the Avs coach, even started off with that. You look at the starting lineups. Dave Haxtell kind of had to choose first who he's putting out there. It was the Yanni Gourde line, and Bednar countered with the Nathan MacKinnon line. And I thought that was maybe a bad decision, and it kind of played out that way because Gourde and his line got the better of MacKinnon and his line. And it actually forced the Avs to kind of change what they were doing throughout the whole lineup because they had to adjust to the Kraken. The Gourde line was too much of a problem for them. And just watching Yanni Gourde in the playoffs, his motor is just unmatched. Like how well that he can skate. He never gets tired. I think of a couple plays in game 2 where setting up Brandon Tanev's shorthanded goal, and I guess maybe that'd be better to leave kind of for the segue toward Tanev. But I mean, Yanni Gourde goes into that corner 1-on-3, shorthanded, and he turns away from guys and he finds a way to get that puck loose out of that corner to his teammate. That is really hard to do. And the other play that I think of too is I tweeted about it earlier. I just kind of tweeted the video, but early on in the game, the Avs had a really aggressive forecheck. And that's something after game 1 that their coach Bednar said, we need to be more aggressive on the forecheck. And that message, clearly the players took it to heart early on. And so there's a play where they dump the puck in. Matt Nieto's the first on it for Colorado, and it kind of pops out to Oliver Bjorkstrand behind the net. And he's got a forechecker coming on him really hard. He's going to be there any second. And because of the chemistry that this line has, Bjorkstrand just knows, without even checking, without looking, that he can rim that puck around the outside boards. And Yanni Gourde is going to, he's not in that spot yet. Gourde's net front, but that he's going to be on the boards by the time that puck gets there. And sure enough, he does loop around and get there to the boards. And then once that happens, Gourde takes a quick look behind him and sees another hard forechecker. I think it's Darren Helm coming at him at full speed, and he's going to try and finish a check. And Gourde's able to see that, draw him in, and just turn off of him at the last second. It's a great move. Helm just ends up checking the boards. It was a great play. And then Gourde's able to kind of tap that puck past Taves, because then Taves for Colorado, aggressive, right? He pinches in. Gourde wins that 50-50 puck, and he wins so many 50-50 pucks. And that's one of the biggest things you can do in a playoff series, just winning those close battles and those pucks that could go either way. Taps it ahead to Eeli Tolvanen. All of a sudden, the Kraken are on a 2-on-1, and it leads to the Justin Schultz goal, the first goal of the game. You take an early lead. Like, go back and watch the entire lead up, like what I was just describing, the entire lead up to that Justin Schultz goal, and see the work that Yanni Gourde does on that play. He only gets the secondary assist on it, but he did so much of the work to make that happen. And it's the things like that he has brought this series, where you're like, yeah, this is why he played such a big role in Tampa winning 2 Stanley Cups.
Yeah, it's just like what I talked about with Justin Schultz, right? Like these are the guys who have been there and done that, and they understand what it takes come playoff time, how you have to elevate your game, how every shift matters, how all of those little things can extrapolate into a bigger positive for your team or even a bigger negative, right? And why you need to avoid certain mistakes. And I feel like Yanni Gourde is somebody that the Kraken are, they're lucky to have right now through a difficult series like this, to have a veteran up front who can do that kind of stuff. Nobody has started shifts in the offensive zone less up front for the Kraken than Yanni Gourde, and yet think of how many plays we've noticed him in the offensive zone, right? Again, I won't just use that for everybody good and bad all the time, but I think that it's really important, because that's one of those times where, that's not even like some advanced stat or anything, but that's where kind of like the analytics tracking, matching that with the eye test, it tells you a lot. Because we've both and everybody watching has seen so much from Yanni Gourde, especially in the offensive zone. So to know that he is the least likely person to start a shift off in the offensive zone, and yet we're seeing him there as much as we are, I think is important to talk about. It's a big deal. Second on the team in hits amongst forwards with 10, behind only Brandon Tanev's 13. He's playing physical. He's getting in there. This is one of the things that has surprised me, RJ. He hasn't drawn a penalty somehow yet. And that's shocking to me, given how physical he's been playing, how all over the place he's been playing, how he does go net front, and he pisses off guys like Josh Manson. I am absolutely shocked that he hasn't drawn a penalty yet. It's coming, though. Game 4, I won't give it a guarantee, but it would definitely not surprise me if the Kraken get a power play chance because of Yanni Gourde out there. Got 3 takeaways so far, and I can remember, I think, all 3 of them. They've all been so special, but the bottom line is he's using his stick when he is defending. He is trying to disrupt the opposing team, whether it's poke checking it away and grabbing it, or it's just getting it in a passing lane and picking off a pass. I mean, he's kind of the only guy on the Kraken, at least amongst the forwards, who's consistently been able to do that and generate those takeaways. And I think that that's very important as well. The only criticism I really have for him, and it's tough to single him out on this because it's been such a team issue, 30% on faceoff so far. That's really not great. But
you'd like better.
Yeah, you would definitely like better. But the bottom line is, I mean, everybody but Ryan Donato is struggling on this team with faceoffs right now. So again, I'm not going to single him out or anything on this. But that line has had to do a ton of work, not just, extending it out to Bjorkstrand and Tolvanen as well. It's had to do a ton of work in this series. They are being matched up against really tough competition, and you see that. If you do go and you look at the lines numbers, right, their expected goals percentage is only at 40%, but it's just because they've spent so much time through all three games having to go up against guys like Nathan McKinnon, and it's because Hacksaw trusts them to do that, and I think that they've really rewarded that, because it feels like the one game that they kind of got away from that was really this third one where Nathan McKinnon was able to kind of go off.
Yeah, and I think too the Avs realize this is the line that's going to cause us a problem, and we always talk about the Kraken trying to kind of contain and adjust to make sure the Avs star players are kept at bay, and when you do focus in on an opposing line like that, you can have success because you zero in, you see what's causing their success, and you try and combat that. But we don't really talk as much about the Avs making adjustments to try and counter the Kraken's best players, and I think we've seen that through the first three games where it's as far as how good they've looked production wise, it's been a bit of a downward trajectory for that Gord line, because I think Colorado, maybe they weren't prepared for how good that Gord line was going to be, but now after a couple games, after three games, they're ready for that. They've made adjustments and they've targeted that really.
Yes, no, they really have. Before I let you go on the Tanev, RJ, the one thing that I want to mention amongst the forward groups has been when Geeky is in the lineup. I thought Geeky has been playing really, really well for this team those first two games in Colorado. You and I have both liked him being on that second line alongside Schwartz and Wenberg, but boy, the two games that that line was able to go out there, 80% of the expected goals are in favor of the Kraken when those guys are out there. They're absolutely killing it. Wenberg doing a fantastic job defensively. I talk about the zone starts and everything, blowing everyone out of the water as far as starts in the defensive zone for Alexander Wenberg. 20.5% out there starting in the defensive zone. Again, when everybody is going to be like 50% or really more than 50% shift starts on the fly, to have a 20% number in any of the three zones is impressive, especially the defensive zone. Dave Hackstall trusts this line completely, and you know what? Through those first two games with Geeky on it, they were more than rewarding him for that trust, because you're talking about starting in the defensive zone all the time, and yet you're going out there and you're creating a ton of expected goals you're limiting the Avs. I just wanted to give that line some love, and hopefully we get Kiki back for game 4.
It's going to be so important to get him back for game 4, because that line, we had questions about that line going into the series. I certainly questioned how well they were going to be able to do. And I think for whatever reason, it's just kind of clicked with Morgan Geeky there. What you're hoping for on that line is that Geeky's going to be able to use his size and kind of his sneaky shot. It's pretty good, actually. And that Wenberg's going to be able to be a playmaker, and they're going to be able to generate some offense. You saw in game 1 with Geeky scoring that huge goal to go ahead 3-1. That's the blueprint offensively. And then defensively, you've got Wenberg and Geeky together, two centers who can both play defense, who both have really good defensive instincts and can share that responsibility. And then Jaden Schwartz is no slouch either defensively. I mean, he's such a smart player, such a cerebral player. And all three of them together would be able to handle pretty much any assignment you threw their way. And I think that's what we've seen from that group. And to be honest, it's just not the same with Jesper Froden there on that wing. It really does require all three of those pieces working together to make it work.
Yeah, it really does. And I'm glad you mentioned Jaden Schwartz, because he's been so disruptive. Bunch of hits. He's drawing penalties. He's got the takeaways. Like he's absolutely killing it out there as well. So happy for him to get that first goal at Climate Pledge playoff history. I thought that was really exciting. This is actually a question I had, RJ, about that. Not to throw a tangent in there. We've been doing good avoiding those. Do you know if the Kraken have been saving those kind of big goals, like the Tolvanen first ever goal in the playoffs? That goal is the first playoff goal at CPA, because I would love this idea of the Kraken having all of these big, these pieces of memorabilia from all these big important games that maybe one day they could display at CPA or 32 Bar and Grill or something. You know what I mean?
That would be great. I don't know actually if they're saving like the pucks or the sticks or anything from that. I would be surprised if they didn't save the pucks or
Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah, that would go really well in like a cool display case at Climate Pledge, or at the Bar and Grill, just anywhere, so that people can see that and kind of collecting the various memorabilia. I think was it the puck or something from the Donato first goal in franchise history just went straight to the Hockey Hall of Fame, because that's generally what
Yeah.
you have to do with that stuff. But for milestones like this, maybe you won't have to, and you can kind of keep that in your possession.
Yeah, I just thought that would be a really cool thing, kind of display all that stuff at CPA, let the fans enjoy it. And I get why you wouldn't do it year 1 or year 2, right? You don't have the history yet. Like, this is something that maybe you see come year 5 or whatever. But I think that would be a really cool thing. So I'm just going to float that out there, and maybe the universe will make it happen. All right, Brandon Tanev, Time RJ, take us away.
All right, been waiting to get started on Turbo here, because he was definitely in the X Factor conversation for us, and that he would have to step up his game because nobody else was going to do it. Nobody else was going to lead the team in hits, and sure enough, that's what he's doing, is leading the team in hits right now. He's been getting involved physically. He's been doing his thing, and he actually contributed with a really big goal in game 2, shorthanded on a great shot. And I mean, let's just get right into it. Blowing the kisses to the away fans there. That is classic Turbo. Everybody loved that.
Yep.
I think that's our most successful tweet ever, numbers wise, was clipping that video and putting it out there. But Brandon Tanev has been exactly what you'd expect from playoff Brandon Tanev. This is why they bring him in. There are certain players that, even though they're not the biggest factor in the regular season always, that, at the end of the day, he was a fourth liner for pretty much all the regular season, and being paid a little bit more than the average fourth liner, considerably more actually. But this is why you do that, to have him in a position where he can bring this to your lineup. The hits, the timely scoring sometimes, the penalty killing ability, and I mean, got to talk about the PK too. We'll talk about it, I think, more just in general, how good the PK has been. But Brandon Tanev's been a really big part of that. And he's done everything that you could ask. And also, when Morgan Geekie was out, he's the guy who jumps up to that second line. Some of the time it was all shuffled around, but Brandon Tanev was often the player who would double shift. He's the guy that Dave Haxtell trusted when you need an extra winger in those situations.
Absolutely, and there's all the reasons there to prove why. Like you said, he does lead the team in hits. Talk about frustrating the Colorado Avalanche with the physical play and just how pesty and all that kind of stuff he can be. 6 drawn penalties. Or 6 penalty six penalty minutes drawn, excuse me. So 3 penalties drawn. Still, that's a lot. That definitely leads the team. That is a ton. I mean, that's a big deal for the Kraken. I mean, well, if their power play was better, we'll get to that. That would be a big deal.
Should
anyway.
be a big deal.
Maybe that's a liability. Get Brandon Tanev out of there. Stop it.
Just have him take more penalties.
Yeah, exactly.
So the whole thing, take one of them with you. Just take one of you with them.
Exactly. But talking about the shot blocks, 5 to lead the forwards in shot blocks. I mean, Brandon Tanev is getting it done. We knew that he was one of those guys that steps it up come playoff time. It's just what he does, and he scores big goal every playoff series and all that good stuff that we talked about last week. And it's all been on display. And yeah, I mean, I know I'm enjoying it. I know you're enjoying it, and it sure seems like the rest of the community is enjoying it as well. So really happy for Brandon Tanev. Last positive, I think, to talk about, because Tanev is a part of this, has been the PK. Incredible. Like, unbelievable work that they've been doing. Like, you go back, I mean, I know they struggled at the beginning of the year in a big way, and that was a big, talking point for us and everybody, and then that really stuck for, like, the national broadcasting crowd was, oh, they really struggle special teams in the PK, and it's like, no, our PK is a lot better, and boy, are they showing it so far through this playoff series.
Yeah, the Kraken 100% on the PK. Yeah. You literally cannot ask for any better. And if you told me through 3 games, the Kraken would be 100% on the penalty kill with a shorthanded goal to boot. I mean, they're over 100%. On the net power play, which, I mean, I think that's a better stat anyway. You score shorthanded, that's the same thing as like knocking a power play goal off the board. They're over 100% on the PK essentially. The Avs haven't gotten a whole lot going as far as dangerous chances, and I was not expecting this. Colorado has a top 5 power play in the NHL, and the Kraken's PK knows just exactly what to do. They take away the passing lanes. They don't let anything really inside toward the net, and they're good at pressuring the Avs too before the point of entry as well. You've got Yanni Gord, you've got a Brandon Tanev. One of those guys can go be the chaser and bring some pressure onto the Avs, even in their own zone, which is just throwing them off. They don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, no, they don't at all. The pressure that they put on the puck carriers. I mean, Avalanche, what they want to do on the power play is pretty simple. A lot of it is actually feasting off a rebound. So this is also in part because of Grubauer just shutting that down completely. His rebound control has been so successful. But right, like they want to give it to Nathan McKinnon over on the left side boards, and they want to let him walk in and shoot if he's got the time and space. But the Kraken aren't giving him that. They're not giving him his pass cross ice to the other half boards that he wants to do and that they've been successful with all year. Kraken are taking that away. I mean, the only time you really see Nathan McKinnon look really pissed off is when he comes back to the bench after a power play, because he's not able to do anything that he wants to do. Any of the stuff that he's used to doing, all the stuff that's, he's scored a bunch of goals in his career doing, he's not able to do any of it on this power play right now. And it is really, I think, starting to get to him. Now, maybe it's just motivating him for 5-on-5 where he's looking good now. But the bottom line is you're taking away, a big part of that. Cale Makar not able to get anything going as well. I think that's, it's incredible. Hats off to the PK unit. Shout out to all of them, including Philip Grubauer. Jared McCann looking great out there on it as well. Like, just the whole thing has looked fantastic.
I checked the league website here, and net PK percentage, I just love this, 114.3% for the Kraken. The old adage, give it 110%. I mean, that's less than what the Kraken PK is giving. They're giving 114%.
They're giving 114%. Oh, man, that's incredible. Absolutely love it. Unfortunately, RJ. From the high, I was going to say, I think it's time. We've talked about a ton of the good stuff that the Kraken are doing. I do think that we need to talk about the things that they're struggling with. And I think the PK, talking about special teams, it provides a natural transition to talk about the other side of special teams, which is, of course, the power play. Kraken, I mean, we know that the power play has struggled all year long. There was never like this, moment where it seemed like they really figured it out the way they did on the PK. Kraken 1 for 11 on the power play now in this series, but they have allowed that shorthanded goal. So, maybe they're 0 for 10 or whatever you want to call it or whatever. But the bottom line is, especially in that game 3, RJ, where you had all of those chances, 6 power play opportunities, and you get the 1 goal, but it was kind of too late to affect you. We've talked about it all year long. Right? The special team. How many losses for the Kraken this year could have been wins just if they had been able to score on the power play? And it's the same thing here. Either game 2 or game 3. What, is one of those games go in the Kraken's favor if they're able to score on the power play? And it's, in some ways, RJ, I think it looks like worse than it even did in the regular season. It's really, really bad. There's no player movement. I mean, I'm struggling to think of anything positive to say about what they're doing with the man advantage right now.
And I think part of it is also what Colorado's doing. They are pressuring the puck carrier a lot. They are very, very aggressive on the puck carrier, and the Kraken just have no answer for that. They can't move the puck away from that pressure. Colorado just wins those battles and they clear it. And I think even the numbers make the power play look maybe better than it is, because that 1 power play goal, that was in garbage time. There was that affected the game 0. And that shorthanded goal that they gave up was a huge one. It's been very rough on the power play for the Kraken in this series, and to the point where people are at this point like, can we decline them? And I think that honestly might be better for the Kraken. You talked about opportunities potentially to win the game. I think in a 1-goal game like game 2 was, yes, every power play is a chance to potentially win the game there when a game that is that close. And these are missed opportunities. And I think of the biggest missed opportunity in my mind was this past game, game 3. You had that big momentum shift in your favor. You get the Alexiak goal, you get the Matty Beniers goal. All of a sudden, the Avs are completely on their heels, and you draw a penalty. You go to the power play at the end of the second period with a chance to take the lead when you were down 2 goals in that period. If you can score there, I can't overstate how huge that would have been for the Kraken. And not just because I'd love to see what that Climate Pledge Arena would have been like, the building, if they had completed that and taken the lead, but just the Kraken have had moments, I think, in this series where the Avs have been scared a little bit potentially,
Mm-hmm.
and they just haven't got delivered that knockout blow at any point. I think you can point back to game 2 where it was 2-0 and you got that 3-on-1 that maybe they overthought and passed a little bit, where that would have been a knockout blow in that game. I think if the Kraken score a power play goal in game 3 to end the second period, that's a potential knockout blow, and that's often what the power play is for, and they just haven't been able to get any of that done. And we can talk about how bad it is, but I think, we should break it down a little bit further. And Dave Haxtell, of course, was asked about this after the last game. The power play started 0 for 5. He's going to get a question about it.
Yeah.
And I thought it was telling that his answer wasn't so much, well, we need to tweak this here. It was more of a back to basics type of answer, just explaining kind of what you want to see on the power play in general. He talked about number 1 is possession. You've got to get puck possession in the zone. He said at times, we were generally pretty good on entries the last couple games. Not tonight. We weren't getting the entries, so we couldn't even get that. Second, he said, is puck speed to beat that pressure. Now, what he means by that, by puck speed, the Avs, as I mentioned, they will pressure the puck carrier. Like aggressively pressure the puck carrier. And you need to be quick with the puck speed, move it away from where you are very fast, find a quick passing outlet, because that's what's going to relieve that pressure on the puck carrier, because that opens up space. If the Avs are going to send 2 guys directly to the puck, they're already short a man because they're shorthanded. That means there's guys that should be wide open elsewhere on the ice. And usually there are. And if you can know where they're going to be, move the puck to them quickly, that's going to help and open up some chances. There was a good Jared McCann chance, late in game 3 that I thought was their best power play chance of the whole series. It's the only time I've seen them do that all series, where they move the puck away from that pressure. And then Haxtell said the third piece of it is simplifying and getting things inside. Mm-hmm. And that just means throwing pucks to those areas. Dylan, we've talked about this all season, haven't we?
Yes.
I mean, this is, if you've been listening to this podcast throughout this season, you probably know exactly what we're talking about. I'll rehash it a little bit here, but it's just throwing pucks to those high danger areas. Simplify. You don't need some, incredible detailed play. It can be as simple as throwing a puck from the point toward the front of the net and getting inside. That means getting bodies to those areas, getting to the inside of the ice, right in front of the net, and getting pucks and players inside. It creates chaotic situations. Pucks will bounce out to you. Sometimes the goalie won't see it. You'll get a screen, you'll get a tip, and that's how you score on the power play when things aren't working well for you, and you need to just simplify your game. Haxtell did mention that late power play goal, and he did qualify it, saying, look, I know it's garbage time, but he mentioned that as an example of getting inside, where you win an offensive zone faceoff. You get the puck at the point. You don't dust it off. You don't try and set up anything complicated. You just throw it at the net, and you've got Jaden Schwartz, who goes directly to the front of the net, gets inside on the defender, and he's able to tip that puck past Georgiev. There's nothing the goalie can do. So that's, I guess, kind of the blueprint for fixing the power play, but they've got a long way to go to actually execute. Execution is the problem here. And we'll see if it can be any better in game 4. Sorry, I've been talking for a long time here, good. Dylan. But you can weigh in on the power play as well.
Yeah, no, it's all good stuff. I think, I mean, I was trying to think of ways of doing that, sending out the tweets yesterday, talking in the Discord about it during the game, how to try to get that power play going. I was pulling basketball plays, RJ. I'm like, just try to do a pick and roll with the bumper guy. Just try to get somebody from the outside in. Like, you have to, because it's so stale. And you talk about the pressure from the Avs PKers, and that was definitely true through the first 2 games. After the second power play opportunity for the Kraken in this third game, Avalanche weren't even bothering to pressure anymore. They just sat back in the lanes. They were just like, oh, these guys got nothing. Like, they're not doing anything. And they just hung back. They weren't even pressuring the puck carriers anymore. I'm the one thing that gives me hope is that you got that last goal, and the fact that the Colorado PK is starting to look complacent, because they are sitting back. So if the Kraken are able to take things back to basics, and they are able to execute a little bit better in this next game, I think you're going to be able to maybe catch Colorado off guard, because you know what Colorado's not going to work on for game 4? Their PK, right? Yeah. They've killed off, 10 of 11 power plays, and the one they let in was in garbage time, so they're not going to really think about it. So I think the one place where you can catch Colorado off guard is going to be when the Kraken have a power play. And so, yeah, I really want to see them treat that aggressively. I really want to see them try to work on that. But the bottom line is, yeah, if they're just going to get back to this whole, we're running the 1-3-1, and everybody is allowed to move maybe 5 square feet in any direction from where they're supposed to post up, but that's it. I just think this is what you're going to continue to see, because the bottom line is nobody's in a good position to shoot. The one thing Colorado's not going to let you do is take shots from the point. So your point man's just completely out of it, just sitting there. And really both players on the half boards on either side, we're not seeing them, in any sort of good shooting spot. They're taking very aggressive angles way off to the side. They are playing very close to the boards. Something has to change. I think the easiest way of doing that is just to get some player movement going on. You know what I mean? Cycle the person with the point with somebody on the boards. Just see if you can catch Colorado with a bad handoff in defensive coverage, or, just 2 people accidentally follow one guy and you're able to create a chance for yourself. But right now, just passing the puck around, using the point to do it, you're never going to see anything open up. You're never going to generate any good chances for yourself. And again, this feels like something I've said way too much this season. But the bottom line is, with both this and faceoffs, which we'll talk about, and clearing the defensive zone and all that stuff that we've talked about throughout this season, the one thing we always said alongside that was, this is going to hurt you come playoff time. And here we are come playoff time, and this power play is costing you games again. And these are the games where you really don't want something as simple as just being above 10% on the power play to be the thing costing you potentially a playoff series. But that's where the Kraken find themselves. It's got to be better for the next one. I think it probably will be. Just law of averages says at some point it must be. But I do think that the Kraken are going to focus on it. I doubt that Colorado is going to focus on it. So I am actually hopeful for Game 4 that we might see a slightly different result. But maybe that's just wishful thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there might be something to that. That late power play, if you can build momentum off of that, I know it's garbage time, but
Yeah.
like you said, the Avs might be getting complacent. If you can just do that again, then all of a sudden you're rolling.
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned it just now, some of the other stuff that we talked about, and that's been, popping up in this, and this face-offs. Oh my gosh, all year when I was playing my stupid face-off game and talking about the Kraken losing face-offs, but it was okay because they would win those games and all that stuff. But then there was that point mid-year where I turned it around and I said, all right, enough fun, enough of that stuff, because the bottom line is, come the postseason, if you're losing defensive draws, this is going to cost you. And oh my gosh, I could never have predicted how much it would cost the Kraken, RJ, with, what is it, 4 now direct face-off goals for the Colorado Avalanche in 3 games. Yeah. It's crazy. It's insane.
I know. I didn't really want this narrative to become a thing, because face-off plays, it all happens differently, and there's so many moving pieces and all this, but I just can't ignore it at this point when you have the Avs scoring 4 goals directly off of offensive zone face-off wins. It's a pattern. I think at this point we can admit that it's a pattern. Yeah. And those draws, they're so big, not even necessarily winning them, but just kind of the movement afterwards too. Certain ones, like you mentioned on the post game, you did a good breakdown of it, but on the Taves goal, the game winner in Game 2, Jamie Alexiak gets kind of tangled up with Evan Rodriguez and can't quite get free to the other side of the ice, and that's what leads to Taves having all that space. Or whether it's just something really simple like the Cale Makar goal in Game 3, where once that draw is lost as cleanly as it's lost, there's nothing that you can do, because Makar is going to step into that shot. The only thing differently you can do is try and step into the lane and block it, which, I mean, good luck. I wouldn't want to do that. And also, you're probably being counterproductive because you're just going to screen your goalie. Like at that point, the goalie just has to make the save or not. And it was a great shot, so he wasn't going to make the save. And I believe it was Matty Beniers taking that draw against Andrew Cogliano on the Makar goal, and Cogliano wins it cleanly, exactly where he wanted to, right to his defenseman. And that's one where it's as simple as just needing a better face-off taker. And it's something we talked about it maybe at the deadline. Do they bring someone in to handle those draws? Francis decided not to do it. And look, we didn't disagree with the decision to stand pat, but those are the trade-offs that come with this. Is now the Kraken are left with the team that they have. And we talked about this going into the playoffs. Like, it's not going to change. As far as just winning those faceoffs, it doesn't change. That's how it works. You cannot change it at this point in the season. It's too late. This is what it's going to be. I think the Kraken did a good job actually kind of later in the game, just adjusting, basically assuming that you're going to lose those faceoffs and positioning your players accordingly. It's not a position you want to be in, but I think it's what the Kraken have to do now.
Yeah.
This is the one that kind of just gives me, the least hope that they can fix. The power play, there's always stuff you can do and move guys around. Face-offs, this is what we're left with. This is what this team is, and especially without Morgan Geekie in the lineup, that hurt. Yeah. I think just having that right-handed face-off taker. But they were at the point where by the end of the game, the Kraken were having Jaden Schwartz take face-offs instead of Matty Beniers, like on the power play. Both those guys were on the ice. I think it's tough for a 20-year-old rookie taking draws in the playoffs in this league, and maybe even just putting some of your veteran wingers in there instead, just doing something. But I don't have a whole lot more to say. This problem just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, it's really rough. You look at kind of the four centers that the Kraken were rolling with in this series so far, and you're looking at Yanni Gourde has actually been the worst, which again is surprising. 30.6% faceoffs. That's really bad. Like it is. Like,
and the Avs are not even a good face-off team if you go by the regular season numbers. They hadn't been that good, but I think, hey, we've watched this team all season. I think neither of us are all that shocked that the Kraken are worse.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that the Kraken would be worse, but it's the fact that you've got Yanni down at 30.5%, Maddie at 38.5%, 38.5%. And you mentioned that the Cale Makar goal, that one where you talked about Alexiak getting and the Devon Taves goal. Alexiak gets tangled up with Evan Rodriguez. Matty Beniers, that was another one where he was the guy taking the faceoff. And not only does he lose the faceoff, but he also got tangled up with the other center and wasn't then able to be a center in the defensive zone and get over there for it. So Matty Beniers struggling big time. Alexander Wenberg, 42.9%. I mean, you're getting better, but still anything below 45% I consider bad. Right? Like that's just fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. So 42.9% for Alexander Wenberg. The one center you have is your fourth line center and Ryan Donato, 70% face-off win percentage. That's fantastic, but the bottom line is they're barely playing their fourth line in this series, RJ. Ryan Donato has 32 shifts. To put that in perspective, Alexander Wenberg has 83. Okay, so yeah, great. He's winning faceoffs when he's out there, but he's barely out there. That's not a solution for you. So I'm with you. Yeah, I doubt that this is a problem that's going to correct itself, but it's one of those things that off season, whether it's working with these guys and getting them better, like Matty Beniers, especially having a year under his belt, he will be better next year. Just following any star center, that's just the progression that they take. Or if it's bringing in somebody who can be a face-off specialist for this team. But I do think that, this playoff series is showing that face-offs has to be one of their off-season focuses. It has to be. They cannot go through the entire offseason and just run it back with this group unless they're really going to dedicate to making this group better at it. And, it's unfortunate that when you're talking about offseason plans, one of the things you have to do is something as seemingly simple as the face-off, but it's costing them in a big way.
Yeah, and I think, look, they're kind of stuck with the centers that they have, and it's not a bad thing. You got, Matty Beniers, Yanni Gourde, Wenberg, and Shane Wright, I think, coming in down the middle. I think that might be a struggle with Shane Wright. Again, just being a 19-year-old rookie. Yeah. There's only so much you can do about that, but I think next year you're looking at maybe adding at the deadline somebody who can come in and take a draw on the spot. I think that might be the way to handle it, because I like the centers that they have, but that can be a deadline addition and one that can probably be done not too expensively.
Yeah, probably. The last kind of issue that seems like it's cropping up again, and was an issue all season long, was just kind of things defensively, whether it's defending against a good transition or it's clearing the zone and finding ways of doing that. And I talked about earlier, like the Alexiak-Borgen pairing and how much they've started defensively, and we've seen them contribute offensively. They're doing a good job of getting it out. Yanni Gourde's doing a good job of getting it out. But it's still been a problem. There's still been way too many series and shifts where any line for the Colorado Avalanche really are able to just keep cycling it and putting pressure on Grubauer, putting pressure on the defense. And we finally saw in Game 3 yesterday for us at the time of recording, the defense just completely collapsed. I've talked in the past. One of the biggest problems you can have as a defenseman is if on the broadcast I can see the back of your jersey, I can read your name and see that big number. That's a problem. And you know what? I could see everybody's name and everybody's number yesterday. I can't tell you the amount of times that the defense was turned around. And just like with the power play, where it's like take it back to simple things. I feel like the defense needs to take it back to some simple things. Just keep the play in front of you. Use your sticks. Nobody's using their stick defensively to try to disrupt passes, poke check, just tangle up the opposing guy so that they can't just collect a pass cleanly. Just some of the real basic stuff right now the defense is struggling with, and it's been a slow progression downwards for this. I think there's hope. I think this is probably the easiest thing to fix between the power play faceoffs and this. I think that, just having a day off to kind of regroup and everything, there's a good chance that the Kraken can come back out. But I do think that that's ultimately really what cost you game 3, was just the fact that you couldn't kind of handle the onslaught, and you couldn't handle it in transition either.
Yeah, and they've had their ups and downs on this over the course of the season, and Dave Haxtell has mentioned that it's kind of just a matter of focus. It's playing that, I guess, lunch pail hockey, as he likes to talk about, but just knowing that you've got to have your assignment all the time, every shift, and that just requires a lot of intense focus. And sometimes when things aren't going your way, when you get caught up in some of the momentum shifts, or I mean, who in the building couldn't get caught up in everything that was going on last game? I mean, it was just, it was a lot. And sometimes you can lose focus in all of that. And I think that's what's happened with the Kraken. When you had that 4 days in between the end of the regular season and the series starting to really know exactly what you want to do, how you want to approach this Avs team, how you want to try and shut them down, you have a lot of focus built up at that point. And I think the Kraken executed on it through a full 60 minutes, the entirety of game 1. But the more games you play, especially as you get into that every other day grind of playoff hockey, the harder it becomes to just maintain that same level of focus, shift in, shift out. And I think we're seeing that start to deteriorate for the Kraken a little bit. Maybe it'll help, like you said, having some rest or being back at home, and just kind of being able to reset a little bit today. So yesterday to those listening, but today is a team day off in between games. Haxtell elected not to practice. I think, that might even be a good thing to kind of reset and just get everyone back on the same page. But they're just going to have to get that focus back one way or another. Yeah. You want to give some kind of X's and O's reason for it, or, they're not, doing this thing properly. But it like we've talked about all season, it's kind of stuff you teach in squirt hockey, right? To teach them as kids. It's just about having that concentration every single shift.
Yeah, it is. And it's something they got to figure out, but I think it's something that they will figure out. I do think that you bring up a good point. I mean, we know what the energy was around that first game in Seattle. I do think that it's entirely possible that the team got caught up in some of that, and it was kind of a crazy game. It was a lot less structured all the way around for the Kraken. I don't think that benefits them. It never benefits you as the underdog. It never benefits you when you're the team. You're not the team that has the best players out there on the ice, which maybe we can transition over to this, but the bottom line is Colorado has the 3 best players in this series, right? They are on Colorado in Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, and Mikko Rantanen. I feel like they are better than anybody that the Kraken have. And that's also something that the Kraken are just trying to deal with, is the fact that, you have to deal with that talent imbalance, and the depth certainly helps, but depth really only pays off for you if it's structured and you have a system in place to take advantage of that depth. And I feel like they lost that even offensively last night in that third game. But I don't know. The Kraken really haven't lost it for multiple games in a row all season long. I feel like this is where their kind of quick ability to recover, and the fact that we never saw them go on a 3-game losing streak throughout the regular, or greater than a 3-game losing streak throughout the regular season, is going to really benefit them looking ahead towards a game 4.
Yeah, they have to recover quickly, but this is a team that's shown that they can do that. And I think, again, with the depth, you mentioned it, like that's how you are going to win games. The Kraken are not going to win any game in this series 6-4. If the final score is 6-4, the Avs won that game. It's as simple as that. And it's about just limiting the opportunities. And that's how teams that maybe aren't as skilled they pull off upset victories.
Mm-hmm.
Is they play really structured hockey. They limit the chances one way or the other, and they kind of leave it up to goaltending and the odd bounce. Which the way Grubauer's playing, I like the Kraken's odds if they
Yeah.
can make games into that. So if it gets as wide open as it was last night, I just think the Kraken are going to lose every single time.
Yeah, it's just it's one of those realities of the series. Said it last night on post game that we would talk about some of the guys that the community is really talking about. We talked about a lot of the guys in the positive section, the players that we've liked. There's a couple guys though that I feel like have really struggled through this series. I think the biggest one, and the maybe it's the biggest surprise, maybe it's not really a surprise, but Vince Dunn has really struggled in this series, especially when you're talking about, look, you need somebody to be able to step up and handle a Nathan MacKinnon, step up and handle a Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen, whoever it is. Vince Dunn, he's really struggling to do that, and not only is he struggling to do it defensively and all of that, we're also not seeing the offense that we saw from him, the dynamic play in the offensive zone. Vince Dunn, I think, has been surprising to a lot of people, RJ. But you know what? This is something quietly I was really worried about with him. Obviously, it's a big glow up for him this year and what he was able to do out there. He's probably going to get some down ballot Norris votes and all of that great stuff. But when you're looking ahead, there was always a part of me that was worried that this was just contract year kind of mirage, and I really hate to say it, and I do think that he has elevated his game. He is a better player this year than he has been at any other point in his NHL career, but it is very unusual for a player in their 6th NHL season at the age of 26 to all of a sudden become that guy, and I was worried about that, and I think we're maybe seeing a little bit of that right now in this series.
And when you talk about playoff resume, I mean, Vince Dunn has won a Stanley Cup before, but he wasn't playing this clear top pairing role that he is with this Kraken team. And something that Hackstall was even okay to label. It was kind of funny at morning skate yesterday. He was asked, how do you get the first line going? He said, well, what line's our first line? That's that's the question I would ask back to you. And then someone later asked, well, do you have a top D pair? And he said, yes. And it's Dunn Larson. And I think Vince Dunn, unfortunately, just hasn't been that difference maker in this series that he had been all regular season. And he was the Kraken's team MVP as voted by us, the media, not to take anything away from what he was able to do in the regular season. But I think at times he's just looked downright bad in this series. And game 3, especially, I just noticed him over and over again, making bad, dangerous plays. I mean, there was the one that stood out to me the most. Well, I guess there's a couple, but the pinch on the 4-on-4, when Nathan MacKinnon is out there, you have to make sure you get your reads right. And once he makes that pinch and loses, it's all over. Adam Larson, even though he had maybe a couple steps on MacKinnon, there's no chance he's catching him. No chance anybody's catching him. And the second one too, and this was the most indicative to me, even more than the pinch, because it's in the kind of heat of the moment type of thing. Do you want to go for it? Do you not? Was a play, I think it was in the second period, where Vince Dunn was behind his own net and he's waiting for the Kraken to get a change. So he's hanging out there for 10 seconds or so. He's got all day. He's got all the time in the world because they're getting a change. There's no pressure on him. And so when he finally decides to move the puck, and there's still nobody pressuring him, he doesn't have to move it right away, but he sees something. He decides to move the puck, and he turns it over right onto Mikko Rantanen's tape, right on the tape of his stick of the opponent, and he's able to walk in and get a really great scoring chance. I mean, thankfully, Grubauer was there, and the Avs didn't score on it, but that's the kind of play that tells me that Vince Dunn, something is not right. When he's making a clear turnover like that on a play where he's not even being pressured. And there were a few of those in this game. Those are only a couple examples of some plays that Vince Dunn made where you just go, where is the guy from the regular season? And it's worrying to me.
Yeah, it's definitely worrying for me as well. That play in particular, oh my gosh, RJ. I mean, just to have that much time, and there's so many things that are iffy about it, right? Including going up the middle, trying to make a pass up the middle, not skating it out yourself. But just, I mean, it was tape to tape. Like, you would have thought they were on the same team. It was just solid right to him. And it's just like, how does that even happen? Like, I just don't even know. It was brutal. You mentioned, the fact that he's won a Stanley Cup before. That was, back in that 2019 playoff run. So it was a little while ago. And you mentioned that, he wasn't in the same role. He is playing exactly right now 9.5 more minutes, down to the second, 9.5 more minutes this playoffs than he played on average in that playoff run for St. Louis. And not only is he playing more minutes, but the level of competition that he's being matched up against is completely different than he was back in St. Louis, just because he was a third pairing guy. He was sheltered on that Stanley Cup run because he was on that third pairing. You're on the first pairing now. You're out there. You're leading this team in ice time. You just have to be better. It's the bottom line. Somebody needs to step up. I understand that it's difficult. I understand that you're not going to be able to stop Nathan MacKinnon all the time. He is that good, all that stuff. But even if you're not going to make the difference defensively, the offense needs to be there. And he's pointless through these 3 games. The -3, I know it's not the perfect stat, but even just, only a couple shots. Only 6 shots in the 3 games. Like, I'd like to see a little bit more there. We talked about the power play. That's been really rough. I don't know. There's definitely some places where I feel like he can kind of step it up, and it's one of those things where it's, pretty soon here we're going to have to be talking about what the extension looks like for him, and you wonder what this might impact in regards to that. So there's that aspect of it. Then there's also the depth aspect to RJ, and 2 of the names that I saw thrown around a ton yesterday was Ryan Donato and Daniel Sprong. And now Daniel Sprong, we can kind of start with him because there's just so much to talk about with Daniel Sprong this year. Obviously the goal scoring was fantastic from him and all of that stuff, but this is one where, I talked about it. Dave Hackstall talked about it with Daniel Sprong. He talked about that when it was, John Hayden was healthy and around, and he was trying to recreate that 4th line so that 4th line was going to be more ready for the playoffs. Obviously John Hayden ultimately ends up getting hurt. Daniel Sprong finishes the regular season very strong. But, caveat, full disclosure, we know he's dealing with something. He was dealing with something at the end of that regular season there through those couple days of practice before the series started. I think that is probably contributing to why he's been effectively a ghost out there for the Kraken so far. But I do think that some of it is also just, this is playoff hockey. You need to be responsible and be able to handle things going back your own way. And that was always the worry with Daniel Sprong. And unfortunately, we're seeing it again.
Yeah, I think we are. And I hate to get too critical on a player in the playoffs that is dealing with an injury, because chances are he is playing with something that would cause him to be out for regular season games. Yeah. I mean, if this was the regular season, he just might not even be in the lineup, and he gets a pass because he's injured. But in the playoffs, players play injured, and it can really affect their game. And so I want to preface everything we're about to say with that, just that's probably what this is. But the result is that Daniel Sprong just isn't himself. He hasn't looked very good on the 4th line. And again, he's kind of a gadget player. There's limits to what he can do. He's not going to be the one finishing every check and kind of laying the body on everyone. He tried in game 1. He had 4 hits in game 1. It was pretty good. You could tell he was with the whole team's message of being more physical, but that's not something you can really sustain, especially if you're injured. He's not getting a whole lot of shots too. He's got 1 shot each in the 3 games that the Kraken have played. He's just not looking like that difference maker on the 4th line. And I don't know, you just wonder what's up with him. And I think that's the reason his ice time has been really dwindling. He played about 7.5 minutes the first game, almost 9 minutes in the second game, but down to under 6 minutes in the third game. And as Dave Hackstall kind of stacked his lines and tried to get things going, Daniel Sprong wasn't a part of that. And even when there was a spot open on that second line where Sprong is slotted in there in the past, if you're trying to bring more offense to that, he's clearly not who Dave Hackstall is looking for in those situations. And it's unfortunate because he was somebody who, maybe we thought might be an X factor. If the Kraken's depth, when they've been on this season, Daniel Sprong's been a big reason why.
Yeah, he really has been. And there's some levels of what we're used to seeing from him, right? Like he's still able to get in there and frustrate a defense. He's drawn a couple penalties. Like, that's super solid. There are those aspects of his game that are still there, and they're still intriguing, and they're still good. But yeah, I think whether it's the issues, maybe defending and the overall team game, or it's the injury. You mentioned the limited ice time he had in Game 3. And that's with him getting a ton of power play time just because the power play was out there a bunch, right? Subtract the power play time from it. I mean, does he even have 2 minutes? It's close. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the even strength ice time is not very much, and also the power play. I mean, he has to be given some of the
Yep.
responsibility for the power play struggles. He is a part of that power play, and especially in the last maybe month or so of the season, the power play's kind of gone how Sprong has gone. Whenever they've had success, he's been a big part of that.
Mhm.
And so when he's not, they just look kind of hopeless.
Yeah. And so, again, it's another one where this is going to be an interesting contract situation. We've talked about that all year long. I still think, that's better saved for the off season when we really try to dig into all of those things. But you really do wonder, does this playoff series inform what the team wants to do with this player? And impact that, because at the end of the day, as the Kraken do transition from a team that's trying to make the playoffs to a team that is trying to win in the playoffs, which is going to be that transition that they're going to be making within the organization, this upcoming off season, it's one of those things that you have to keep in mind. And yes, this playoff, if the Kraken get bounced here in the first round, it's going to be an extremely small sample size that you're working off of, but it's going to be one that's going to be really important, and I think really indicative of how the Kraken are going to handle the players that they have, on expiring contracts. They're going to look and see what they did for this team on this postseason run, because they're planning on having a lot more postseason runs. And you want to make sure that you've got the personnel for it. Ryan Donato was that other player. RJ talked about him earlier. He's being successful on the faceoffs. I still don't feel like he's the answer to your fourth line center. We didn't really talk about that during the regular season all that much. I like Ryan Donato a lot. He's a player I'd like to see the Kraken maybe stick with. I like what he can do on the wing in a depth role. But fourth line center wise, I mean, he's winning the faceoffs, but there's, the fourth line is not the fourth line that we saw really all season long.
No, and it's not the ideal spot for him too. I mean, he's kind of just playing center and spot duty there. It's not really his natural position. I'd like to see what he could do as a winger. The Kraken just don't have the luxury of that kind of depth. If you had Andre Burakovsky on that second line, you could move Morgan Geekie to fourth line center, and Ryan Donato could do his aggressive forechecking and do everything that he really does so well. Then maybe you'll see something different. But he's in a tough role, and I think he's struggling a little bit in that role. And maybe part of that is playing with a Sprong and maybe a Jesper Froden, who aren't the biggest difference makers either. It's a tough assignment, but he hasn't really been able to break through. And again, he's not playing a lot either. He's basically playing 7 minutes a night, and it's hard to make a big difference in that amount of ice time. The Kraken have found ways to do that on their fourth line all season, but just it's hard to do in this situation in the playoffs, especially when it's all moving around so much. Like, that's the thing, I don't want to be too critical of Donato because this is a really tough assignment for him, but maybe it is something the team looks at going forward. Again, when you look at how their forward group is going to shake out with Shane Wright going to be joining the team, there's really only one spot left between Geekie, Donato, and Sprong. You can kind of only keep one really that's going to get regular ice time. And who does it go to? I'm thinking Donato and Sprong, it's looking less and less likely here, especially with Morgan Geekie playing well.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting offseason discussion that we'll have, and lots of discussions within the Kraken front office as well. Last thing for me anyway, is the first line. I feel like we do have to talk about the first line and their struggles.
Well, what line is the first line, Dylan?
Well, the Matty Beniers line. Won't say. The Matty Beniers line. Because you know what? All year, the team has been saying that for Calder reasons, right? That he's on a playoff team and he's centering the first line, because that's a big part of the Calder pitch for Matty Beniers. So I guess if, we're going to say it for that, we got to say it for this too, just in the interest of fairness. But this Matty Beniers line is struggling, and they've struggled through all 3 games. They're not totally struggling. It's not like quite the levels of like the fourth line struggles or something, but I feel like just the fact that they're not scoring is a story, because this is a line that not only has Matty Beniers and all the numbers he's been able to put up, it's got a veteran in Jordan Eberle, and it's got your 40 goal scorer in Jared McCann. And Jared McCann, 1 assist through this. He's somebody I want to talk about. Matty Beniers, we talked about the face-off stuff. Don't need to go over that again. But Matty Beniers, he just looks like a different player to me. He looks a little bit more timid. He's not trying to go win some of the same physical battles that he was beforehand. I don't know if the team told him to do that or he's just trying to get used to the speed and intensity of the playoffs. But I think that that's part of the story here. I don't know. You could pick anything you want to talk about with this first line, RJ. I just think that it's one of those ones where if the Kraken are going to win the close games like game 2 of this series, that first line has to step up.
Right, and it was one of the biggest storylines going into Game 3 is kind of how do you get that line going? Because I think the Kraken just aren't going to go very far if you don't get it going. And they did a little bit in Game 3. I mean, Matty Beniers scored a huge goal in that one. I think that gave him a lot of confidence. He looked more confident after that. That line looked better after that sequence. And so I think that's going to be big for their confidence, the momentum going forward. But yeah, through the first 2 games, I mean, they were pretty much invisible. And I think that's a problem. I think part of that is they just don't have as much time and space to work with. I think part of that is a function of playoff hockey. Part of that's just Colorado and getting tough matchups. But that line tends to do better when they've got time and space to make a play. And I want to talk about Jared McCann because, yeah, he's the Kraken's 40 goal scorer, not getting a whole lot done production-wise so far in this series. And we know he has an absolutely lethal shot, but I can't think of really many times where he's had the space and the ability to kind of let that go. I mean, he does like to have a little bit of that extra room. That's why he's so good on the power play when he's able to circle up high and just walk it in for a little bit as he picks his spot. That takes time and space. And the Avs, certainly on the power play, are just not giving him that at all. And I think it is kind of frustrating him at this point. And so we'll see if I think you kind of have to manufacture that for him a little bit, whether that's, drawing up certain plays to give him some more space. Because you look at the Beniers goal they generated, like McCann was just in there behind the net as a forechecker, digging that puck loose. Like that's not his usual spot. So I think you just, and I think Jordan Eberle also is the third part of this. He's usually the guy who provides that space by being a playmaker for Beniers and McCann, and I haven't really noticed him hardly at all in this series.
Yeah, it's been rough. What's crazy is like we talk about not really noticing them, and then you sort this team by shots, and you got Jaden Schwartz leading the way with 8 shots. Jordan Eberle tied with Ryan Donato for second on the team with 7 shots each. So I guess Donato's doing something there, and so is Eberle, and then Matty Beniers and Jared McCann in a sea of a bunch of people with 6 shots apiece. But it's one of those where, yes, they're getting shots, and I can think of some of those shots that this line is getting, but they're low percentage shots. They're shots where, you're just sending it right into the goaltender. Nobody's really there for a rebound. It's just, this is the line more than any that I feel like is having a hard time penetrating the Colorado defense, getting guys to the inside, getting guys net front. I know kind of in the regular season that was more Matty's role, but as Matty's struggling with the more physical sides of playoff hockey, you're seeing that kind of whole situation break down for the line. And I think that that's something that they're going to have to address, or maybe Hackstall is going to have to line match a little bit more than he maybe wants to, so that you can maybe just try to get this line going in the first period of the 4th game. Send them out there against the 4th or 3rd lines for Colorado. Let them go up against some lesser competition and see if that can get them going a little bit. And then that confidence and momentum can carry them through the rest of the game, or maybe the rest of the series. Because otherwise, I just think you're just going to continue to see more of the same for this line, which is just not much.
And I think back to those games toward the end of the season against the Coyotes, the one where Matty was in there on the forecheck, taking out 2 Coyotes defenders with just bowling into him, and what they were able to create doing that. And this just feels like such a different situation. You're not playing Arizona anymore. These are some really good defensemen here that you're dealing with, and it's just not that easy. You're going to have to find ways to work through that, and maybe that even means just kind of taking the lessons this year and applying them next year. Like, I don't know how much you can even do, given where he's at right now. We forget he's still 20 years old.
Oh yeah.
Like it's really tough to change things on just a game-to-game basis every other day. I think these might be some longer-term lessons that he needs to kind of take, apply, and grow. That we need to preach patience on this, because we might not see the solution now. I believe certainly we'll see it eventually, but we got to remember that timeline.
Yep, and you talk about that play. Matty Beniers, only Oliver Bjorkstrand has less hits than Matty Beniers amongst the forward group for the Seattle Kraken right now. But as you said, he's 20. Like it's one of those, like, there's all these guys that we've talked about, it feels like we could find a way to give them a pass. And certainly they do deserve it, but at the same time, like, you know, it's the playoffs, and a lot of Kraken fans are really excited about all this and everything, and I do think that it's, you know, it's important to talk about the things that they're struggling with and everything as well. But as you said, with Matty Beniers especially, we talk about this with the cores, we can kind of come to a conclusion here on this very long podcast, is talk about, you know, the future for this team and how bright the future is because of Matty Beniers. This playoff is going to mean so much for a player like him, for the other young guys or the other guys on this team that don't have a ton of playoff experience, because, you know, you and I both talked about it. All these groups, all these, like, you know, dynasties or almost dynasty teams around the NHL that we've seen this past decade and a half, they were all groups that had to lose first. And they had to go through some brutal playoff series beforehand to kind of learn what it takes to overcome those things and move forward and win as a unit. And I think that that's something that is just, it's a part of the natural evolution in the NHL. Nobody's able to really come together. Look at this Colorado team. Last year, they had to completely sell out, and it was like, hey, everybody's losing their jobs if this doesn't work. You know what I mean? Because it had failed so many times before, and then Colorado was finally able to make it happen. I don't want the Kraken to get to that level or that place, but I do think that it's one of those that you do have to learn the hard lessons the hard way if you're going to succeed in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. So I think that's this, you know, whatever happens the rest of this series is going to be nothing but positives long term for the Kraken, and certainly for players like Matty Beniers.
Yeah, and you look no further than the team that's on the other side of the ice that went through this, you know, a little while ago. But when you look back at the 2018 Colorado Avalanche that lost in the first round, you know, their first season making the playoffs after, you know, in their current iteration. You had a 22-year-old Nathan MacKinnon. You had a 19-year-old Samuel Girard, a 21-year-old Mikko Rantanen. These guys learning those valuable lessons at those times. 25-year-old Gabriel Landeskog. I mean, you can just go down the list of the core that they have that ended up winning them a Stanley Cup. 22-year-old JT Compher. I mean, they're all there, and they're gaining that experience, and it didn't come right away. I mean, they had to learn those lessons, and it was several years before they ended up combining to win a Stanley Cup. But those are the series that kind of forge the lessons and teach you what it takes. And I think for the Kraken, playing against a team that's the defending champions, I mean, I can't imagine a better kind of place to learn and get those lessons than against Colorado. And that's not to say the series is over. Kraken still got to have a good chance in that. But whatever happens in the series, I think you're going to have some valuable takeaways. And it's just money in the bank. We've talked about that just going into the playoffs. Like, no matter what, they're in a good situation going forward.
Yep, absolutely. Again, in Ron we trust, and Ron said 3 to 5 year plan, or in year 2. It's ahead of schedule. If this is if the schedule was playoffs in year 3, we're ahead of schedule, even if it's not. And you know, the important thing is to remember Matty Beniers getting that experience this year. Next year, Shane Wright will get that experience, right? Like, we're going to go through this again with him next year. So, you know, it really is one of those where it's exciting when you're in the playoffs and you want to win when you're in the playoffs. But really the brightness that is around the Seattle Kraken organization is in the future, and it might be, you know, more than this year, more than even next year, as far as being out there. But boy, the ability just to think of one day, RJ, Matty Beniers going out there, leading scoring, being what Nathan MacKinnon is right now for Colorado out there, and then having somebody like a Shane Wright to shut down the Nathan MacKinnons of the world as your other center. I mean, that is just something that is going to be really, really special to watch one day. Once we get there, it's just, gosh, waiting for it is going to take a long time, and it's going to feel like a long time, unfortunately.
Right. But yeah, you got to enjoy the progression, though.
I know.
And I think I'd rather have this than, like, you know, Vegas getting to the Cup final in year 1 and then just not having gotten back there since.
Panicking, like, every year after.
Yeah, this is the better way to do it, I think.
I totally agree. You and I are definitely on the same page there. I think a lot of the community is as well. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this podcast. Thanks to Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring it, as always. And we will see you all next time. Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons. Absurdly Sane, Alex, Andrew, Anonymous, Ben, Burnt Creme, Kaylin, Chris, Cody, Connor, Coop, Daryl, DJ Singletone, Duthin, Eli, Elizabeth, Evan, Tabak, Gaby, Gary, Gregory, Jay, Jane, Jeremy, Jessica, Joni, Joshua, Keegan, Kepler, Kitty B. Kraken,
Leanne, Light, Lonnie, Mark, Maya, Michelle, Noah, Nunya, Paige, Paul, Rebecca, Sarah, Scott, Sean, Sergey, Shoeshine, Skeletal Tendency, Steve, Steven, Striatic, Pasty Kobold, Team YMIAT, Tank Commander Ty, Wendy, Strife, and Zane. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.